part 2 of Brick and Mortar. So when we came back to town, when I was in 10th grade after our 2-year hiatus, this is what I remember. Property 1, long gone. Property 2, they got into a fight over trying to sell it to some members of the church. It went to court. It was a mess. Property 3, which now looks like this from the front with a lovely green coat of paint. I think that was also in the deal with Property 2 and in court and a mess. Property 4, sold when we moved. Property 5 across the street from Property 4, I don't know what happened to that one, but there's a story about this. Okay, so here's a side view of Property 5 and you see that long dirt driveway. Somehow this property had oil heaters and my father was no longer allowed to use it or have it, and somebody in the government got involved and said that he could not have the oil heaters on the property because of the renters, I don't know, toxins or something. So he dumped all the oil into the driveway, the dirt driveway. And I had been studying about the environment in school and I'm like, what are you doing, Dad? Isn't this getting into the water table, Dad? He just told me to shut up and kept pouring barrels a little at a time all over the dirt of that driveway. It was black. That had to have been illegal, don't you think? Property 6, the daycare center, we were in the throes of that one. We still owned it. Property 7, we still owned and were living in. Now remember, it had been a rental when we lived up the street and owned the property across the street. And my father let this little family move in. They were black and the mom had found a job. And I wasn't allowed to be her friend. Nope, my dad didn't want me associating with Fenelon. They were good enough to take money from, but not good enough to let their daughter be friends with a black girl. For which I got treated like crap in my WASP school, let me tell you. And so while living in this place and running the daycare center, we also owned this place. My parents bought it shortly before we left, I think, to store all the yarn that my mom bought for her yarn business. They bought a bunch of closeout yarn from a Dr. Denton factory or something. The whole top floor held yarn. The bottom floor was a shoe store business, and the middle floor held some apartments. There's more about those in another TikTok. And you see, I'm asking what it was all for because I was raised with this value, often quoted from my mother. She would sneer and say, what is it all for, these people that invest in brick and mortar, all these rich people who own all these buildings and properties? Hypocrisy much? Confusing much? Yeah, Mom. What was it all for? On top of all this daycare and apartments, there was, of course, the church sucking our time. More in part 3.